All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Monday, December 12th, 2016 meeting in Kubernetes SIG Service Catalog. Today, we have an action-packed agenda full of administrivia for you. I'm putting the link into the chat now, and I'm going to continue speaking because I am first on the agenda, having the bully pulpit. So first matter of agenda today is that as everybody who has been tuning into these meetings, watching them on YouTube, can probably tell, we have a lot of activity going on. And we also have a number of companies that are devoting significant resources to this effort. So the pattern that we have for those things in Kubernetes SIGs is that we have multiple leaders of a SIG. So I have reached out to Aaron Schlesinger, Doug Davis, and Brendan Melville from Deis, IBM, and Google, respectively, yes, you are resources, Morgan, to be co-leads of the SIG. You may offer your condolences to them now, since this is a job that takes much time and is little reward except for the satisfaction of a job well done. So you may offer them condolences starting now and ending now. Second, let's see here. Oh, yes. Come. Okay. Sorry. Second, now I have sent a message to the mailing list for the group, which I believe all of you are probably on, with a proposal to limit the amount of working against one another that we have to do. Very good share technique here, Jessica. Limit the amount of working against one another that we have to do, and basically get some economy of effort around KubeCon submissions, because there are many people probably interested in submitting, but only maybe one or two will get in. So what I propose is that we have a panel, an official panel submission for the SIG. The reason to go with a panel is that on a normal CFP response, there are a max of 2 presenters. I think that we have more than 2 parties that would like and deserve representation on an official KubeCon-ish thing. So I'm going to suggest that we do a panel. I'm going to start writing up an abstract for the panel. We can do a demo as part of that, and that way we can get the folks that should have representation up there. And also, let me just note, I think an official-ish submission is also one that we should collaborate on and ensure everybody's comfortable with the messaging around, since we all have our different designs on Service Catalog. So if folks think that is a good idea, I will ask that we avoid individual submissions that might be out of band or that the wider group might not know about. Of course, I can't stop any of you from doing that, but in the spirit of good sportspersonship, I ask you to do that. And if there are any questions or concerns about that, we can certainly talk about it on Slack or offline somehow. And I think that's about it for that. Any thoughts on that before we move on?
My only thought is who might be taking the lead for those talk submissions. Usually it helps to have 1 or 2 people carrying the flag of that effort.
Who do you mean? Who will formulate those things?
Just who will wrangle all the cats.
Gotcha. So I offer my cat wrangling services. I have a very fancy net that I tend to use for cats. and some other cat wrangling devices, contraptions, etc. However, since I am overscheduled in my professional life, if someone else would like to step up, I am happy to hear a voice respond in the affirmative to that, with the caveat that I am already kind of on the hook for this in my own work life, so maybe we can collaborate. Okay.
Happy to collaborate.
Collaborate with Aaron Schlesinger? Never.
I'm an asshole, so
Yeah.
you don't want me to. No,
that sounds great.
You're gonna get something started. So once you do that, then I'll jump in and help.
Okay.
I was going to say, can you join me to that list of assholes? If you need any help, I'm more than happy to help out.
All right. Noted. I am adding Doug to my list of assholes.
Thank you.
Nice.
That was
Right.
perfect, Doug.
I would like to take this opportunity to remind you all that all of these meetings are recorded, so do take that into consideration when making future comments.
I will just point out that I did not hear Jess speak up to contradict the assertion, so I'll just move on.
Let the record show no one spoke up to contradict the assertion, Doug.
Exactly, that is true, yes.
All right. Now, Brendan, you have the floor. You have the next agenda item.
Oh, hey, okay, so what is it? Planning. So, I had this discussion earlier today with the leads. My main question that I wanted to bring up was, we've been doing work, but it's largely been unfocused. How can we bring focus to this? What are we going to? When are we going to start planning deliverables, and what are the roadmaps to get us to those deliverables? How can we start prioritizing our work items and managing them appropriately? And I think from a discussion we had earlier today that we probably can't dig into all of that in this meeting right now, but we can definitely plan for a meeting in which we can plan, perhaps later this week. I think, Paul, you would like after Wednesday. I have a shady Friday, and so maybe Thursday is a good day for whoever's interested in joining that conversation.
Yes, after Wednesday would be best for me. I expect to have more clarity on number of cats to add to the cat pool after Wednesday.
Great. So maybe an action item is that we can schedule something for sometime on Thursday at the 4 p.m. Eastern time slot, perhaps.
That sounds like a preferential time slot to me.
Cool. Would you take that action item with your Zoom, your Zoominess?
I will.
Awesome. Thank you.
I will do it now since I suck at all things involving remembering to do things.
Well, if I don't see something, I'll bug you.
Okay. All right. I think you have the next agenda item too.
Oh, great. Let's see. I've lost my view of the doc. Give me a moment. Oh, right. Okay. So the next agenda item, I've noticed that in a lot of our PR work, we have having existential crises or philosophical crises around various things like naming or how our repo is set up, and I felt like it was important to just answer some questions once and for all so that we can start increasing velocity on our work around just the general philosophy around how our repo is set up, the different tooling involved, some of the different things that have maybe many different opinions across the group. It would be great if we could, stop having opinionated discussions and start having some action. And so again, I brought this question up in the when some of the leads met, and we all felt like it was important to prioritize velocity right now. We're very young. It's still important that everybody has a voice in the group and everybody's able to express their opinions. But for the sake of getting to a point where we have something that is approaching functional completeness that we can show to the world, we really want to prioritize progress over correctness, over perfection, over doing things the right way and doing things the long-term way. And so we came up with a list that's already in the notes of some of the concrete things that we want to do in order to prioritize accordingly. The main point, I think, is that Paul is, in the terminology of the Kubernetes incubator, he is the champion of this SIG. Yep, round of applause for Paul, or condolences. I'm not sure which, but
I think more of the latter.
Yeah, but what it means to be champion is that his job is to espouse things like philosophy and drive Kubernetes-ness. And so what we're thinking is that for opinionated things, for philosophy and policy style things, we should just defer to him for now, because having a single opinion that we can defer to allows us to progress without prolonged, intracted discussions. Another point that we wanted to stress is that where there are let's try to move a lot of the contentious, uncomfortable discussions out of PRs, and we can do that in two ways. One, by making sure that that PRs that are going to be uncomfortable or have contention, make sure those have issues before they have PRs. So let's bring a lot of that discomfort into issues where we can discuss them in a more apt environment. And then the second side of that is any PRs that come out with some sort of contention, that can arise during the review process. Let's not block PRs on getting those settled. Let's allow those PRs to go through and make sure that whatever is contentious or whatever is challenging gets turned into a follow-up issue or PR or whatever, where we can then discuss those uncomfortable things and do whatever changes needs to be done after the fact. But the main point is, let's make sure that we're getting PRs through as quickly and as comfortably as possible, because we're so young and there are so many moving pieces and things that we have philosophical arguments about right now may end up being, moot points in a month or in 2 months when we get to a more GA product. So guys who we discussed this with this morning, feel free to add anything I may have missed or correct me if I was convoluted in any way.
I think you said it pretty well. I have nothing major to add except that I can appreciate that some of the, well, all right, I do have something to add. So I can add as like Paul 2 months wiser than Paul who is 2 months less wise, that if I could go back in time, hop in my handy time machine, I would probably do or attempt to do a better job at messaging around some of this stuff. But I didn't, and I don't have a time machine, so I can't. But I will say it's been a learning experience, and I can also say that I totally appreciate preferences around repo layout that might be counter to what Kubernetes does. I'll just leave it at that. So, have we exhausted the agenda?
No, we have two other things.
Oh, well.
Doug's next.
Sorry, I have like at least 70 tabs open, so I lost the agenda. All right, Doug, you have the floor.
Yes, actually, let me do them in reverse order. After this week, are we going to have any more meetings, or should we assume everybody's on vacation starting next Monday?
I'm sorry, do you get vacation? Do other people in this meeting get vacation?
No. I'm here today, aren't I? I should have all of December off, but I'm here for you, Paul.
I'm confused. I don't even know what this vacation thing is.
So then you're up. Then you're up for a face-to-face January 2nd. That's what I'm hearing, right?
I can appreciate your escalation attempt, but it is denied. No, I will not be meeting none of those things on January 2nd. No. Yeah, I think maybe we can call it after this week for the year. I personally will be around, but I know that other folks are traveling, but I do wonder what the group thinks about this.
Is there anybody that won't be on vacation starting next week?
I will be here on Monday next week.
I'll be here on Monday too. Is there any value that we want to get out of meetings after this week? Like, is it worth just like saying, yeah, let's call it a year?
So if we were to meet after this week, I would say it's probably most important to make progress on getting the API server to the point where it can serve the API that we are designing, and to continue design discussion. But if people want to do things like spend time with their families, relax, I think that is acceptable marginally.
Yeah, I think we should just assume starting next week we're done. And if people are going to work, we'll just talk to each other through Slack or PRs and issues. You're on mute, Paul.
Okay, I think that that works for me, and I will probably try to be doing stuff next week.
Okay. The other issue that I want to bring up today was face-to-face. I believe we were talking about doing one in January. Based upon the phone call we had earlier today, it sounds like the first possible week might be the week of January 23rd. Being a little bit selfish, Thursday and Friday of that week. Otherwise, we may get pushed out until, I believe, February. But I wanted to get a sense from the group on what you guys think.
23rd should be doable for me, or later.
Yeah, and I realized just after that call that I may be out that entire week, but my plans are not fully set in stone.
When do you think you'll know for sure?
Probably the end of this week.
Okay. Well, maybe what we could do then is, since we're meeting on Thursday, we can revisit this again on the Thursday call very briefly, and by then maybe people will have more firm idea what their plans are for the month of January.
Yeah, and I think we have a couple guys here at Google that I was going to poll to see what their time frames look like too.
Okay, so everybody be thinking about it, and we'll talk again on Thursday.
Am I muted?
Nope, I can hear you.
No, I was curious. Do we have any idea where it is just for traveling? So if you're coming from the West Coast to the East Coast, then that's going to take more time than if we go to the good coast.
I don't think we have a decision yet.
Okay.
I personally found Boulder to be a very nice place to meet, but I am wary of overstaying my welcome after Deis so generously hosted the first time, and I would not like to invite myself back anywhere.
we could also, I mean, if Boulder is a good location, we also do have an office there. I don't know.
Ah, yes, that's true. That's true. Now, are there floor-to-ceiling whiteboards?
I will check on that, but I would
I
assume.
hear at Google you could just write on the walls, whiteboard or not.
It's preferred
Yeah.
with Sharpies, yes.
Okay. Spray paint.
Okay.
For the Deis folks, it's not going to work pretty much anything until the 23rd or later of January.
Noted. So I'm not sure we can arrive at a conclusion in this meeting. I wonder, I think from talking with the other leads earlier, we agreed to kind of circle the wagons and see what our logistical and budgetary capabilities were. So that might inform a decision on where, if not when. But the sense that I'm getting is that probably the week of the 23rd is the earliest that we could do it without inconveniencing or stressing out people.
Paul, would it be worth just throwing a doodle into the Slack channel or the email list for anybody who's interested, and then we can just get everything in one place that we can look over?
Yeah, we can do that. So has anybody created the doodle yet, or was that one of my takeaways?
I think it was one of your takeaways.
Okay. When I create the doodle, I will send it to the list and put a link in the chat. In the Slack channel.
Thank you, sir.
All right. So that leaves us out of agenda items. And so the decision I'd like to pose to the group is, I think that we had a pretty decent meeting on Friday, for those of you that joined us, about reviewing the API server work that Morgan Bauer has done and talking about some preliminary next steps. I would like to have follow on to that, but I think it's more of a 1 hour item than a 30-minute item. I would be happy to start talking about it now, or we could talk about it tomorrow in a 1 hour meeting, since everybody has such copious time that they're like, cool, another hour meeting, that sounds great. How do people think about that? Or how do people feel about that, and what do you think?
I wouldn't mind getting started now, with the understanding that we stop at the top of the hour.
Okay, noted.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I was hoping to go in and maybe try to add another endpoint or two soon. So more detail, the better.
Okay. So yeah, we can do that. And I think what I might go ahead and do now, since not everybody was here, is just give a tour of what an API group looks like. If anybody's not familiar with the concept of a Kubernetes API group, will you speak now or forever hold your peace?
What is an API group?
Okay, so
It's never defined anywhere. It's just referenced everywhere.
Well, I suggest that after we have a clear, concise definition, that you, Morgan Bauer, go back and feed that back into the existing doc. How does that?
That's fine with me.
Okay. So an API group in Kubernetes is you can think of it basically as like any API is in an API group. API groups are just a way of thinking about API surfaces and a way of dividing them into smaller, more manageable units than the enormous API that is like the main Kubernetes API. I'm recovering, or I'm retracing some footsteps from Friday, but here's the TLDR version, is that when we were building the main Kubernetes API, we did not have the infrastructure to subdivide the API into groups, and as a consequence, the main Kubernetes API is like vast. It's huge, and ideally, if we could go back and do it again, we would subdivide that thing further into different groups that we could vary at different speeds. And yes, Doug, an API group means a set of resources that are presented behind a single REST endpoint, basically. Or that share a common ancestor in the REST hierarchy.
Got it. Thank you.
So retracing some other footsteps, Morgan Bauer at IBM has been the head of the spear and has spent the last couple weeks on a solo mission to basically bootstrap our own API server, which is a feat not to be underestimated, because the documentation for doing this is not basically Morgan's writing it as he goes, because we're one of the first groups that wants to build a baby Kubernetes, and part of a baby Kubernetes or a Kubernetes is an API server. So we are now at the point where I merged, it was sometime this weekend or earlier today, don't remember, doesn't matter. I've merged his skeletal API server that you can run, you can point kubectl at it, and it thinks it's talking to a Kubernetes, but it's empty right now. And the hump that we need to get over, maybe not hump, but next steps are that we now need to add an API group to the API server. We've been designing an API based on conversations that we've had in the face-to-face after we agreed on sort of some generalities of what the workflow should be like in the API. And as many of you have been attending and taking part in, we've had some follow-up discussions. We're now at the point where our next step is really to get our API server to actually serve this API. And that will allow us to start writing controllers against that API server. There are some folks that build UIs around things that I'm sure would like to have an API server that worked that they could integrate with. This is sort of like the linchpin in baby Kubernetes effort, which I will refer to henceforth as baby netties. So let me share my screen, and I will go back through what the pieces of an API group look like. That's not the right window. Okay. Just get my font size up here. All right. Can folks share? Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay. So let's look at. We'll look at the main API in Kubernetes. Whoops, it helps if you know how to use Unix find. So as I've said a couple times before, I'll say it again now. In Kubernetes, another concept that we have is the concept of a versioned API and an internal API. The versioned API is one version that we're serving of a particular API. So if we have any folks on the call that were present before V1 of Kubernetes, we had at one point V1 Beta 1, V1 Beta 2, V1 Beta 3 versions of this main API in Kubernetes. And those are all mutually translatable. And the mechanism that you translate them through is this internal API. So the internal API, we also call unversioned API, is a superset that has to be able to realize any particular versioned API inside of it. And you'll see here we have this file I'm highlighting, conversion.go, and another one called Z generated conversion.go. So part of an API group, in order to achieve this translatability, is a set of methods to do conversions from the versioned API into the internal API. And here's where I'm gonna switch context for a moment. And I will let's take a look at what we already have in our service catalog internal API. Notice there's no V here. So what we've been designing so far is the internal API. It's going to match very closely. It should match one-to-one with our initial version. But we're making a hedge that in the future service catalog API scientists will come up with stunning advances that will just completely blow our minds that we'll want to take advantage of. So we're going to have an internal one that, in addition to the version one, so we can vary them independently. All right, now switching back, let's look at what's in this directory. So going through in order, we have this types swagger.doc generated.go. I know that some folks have been particularly keenly interested in what type of documentation we have for this effort, which is a right and good thing to be interested in and want. The types swagger.doc generated.go is a file that contains the Swagger API that we generate from the GoDoc comments and API resource types. All right, and this is the actual file that serves the API if you go to like kubernetes.io. So we're going to have the same thing. I don't know exactly where it will be publicly hosted, but probably that's a problem that many groups will have. We'll sort it out as we get to it. I think for now we can probably use GitHub Pages or something to host it. So the next one, going down the list in order, is register.go. And this is a file that basically tells the API server infrastructure, these are the resources that are in this API group. Next is Z generated defaults. And what defaults are, for those that aren't familiar with the concept in Kubernetes, is defaults are a set of operations that run to populate the state of objects as they are created in the API server. So they're defaults. They're what they sound like. The Z generated part is that you can sensibly generate many of these, but for ones that you need to do some kind of boutique default for, there is defaults.go, which contains handwritten defaults. All right. So I'm gonna break the ordering here just to ground the next stanza of this discussion, or monologue as the case may be. And this types.go file, I think everyone's probably familiar with this as idiomatic name of the file that contains the types for a package. Skipping back, we have types.generated.go, which is actually a YAML parser. And for those of you lucky enough to be unfamiliar with the ins and outs of parsing YAML, that also includes a JSON parser because YAML is a superset of JSON. So the origin of this is that we found at a certain point that the generic YAML parser that we were using in Kubernetes was a hotspot within the API server. So we have some infrastructure in the project which we will probably be the head of the spear to reuse this. I would love to be wrong on that, but I think we'll probably be the first class reuser of this generation to generate a YAML parser that understands this particular set of API types. So skipping ahead here, or just resuming our order in descent through this directory listing, we have generated.pb.go. And this is a generated protocol buffers-based wire format for sending these API resources over the wire. For anybody that isn't familiar, protocol buffers is basically a way to generate a wire format which is much more efficient for transmitting structured data than it is to send like serialized YAML. In Kubernetes, we use this, but we use it between infrastructure components only because we've found that it is much harder to support an end user that has some kind of problem when they're using protocol buffers. So it is used, but it's basically for the system. End users are going to be sending serialized YAML or JSON. Meta.go is not something that we will have in our API group. It is where the implementation of V1 object meta lives. Object meta is a type. It's not a resource, but it's a type that is used by all resources that holds information like namespace, name, API version, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So next, we've got some more generated stuff. We've got double Z generated deep copy. It's what it sounds like. It's a generated set of deep copy functions. Since they're no fun to write, easy to get wrong, and easy-ish to generate. Next, we've got double Z generated conversion, which is what it sounds like. It's a set of generated conversion functions. I anticipate that initially there should be no need for boutique conversions, which are the next file, conversion.go. But the infrastructure exists to have boutique conversions if you need them for a particular type. We shouldn't need those because you tend to need them as you accumulate things like, we changed the API in this API group version, and now we need to be backward compatible. We won't have to worry about that at first. Helpers.go, what it sounds like, not material to this discussion. And doc.go, I have been told, is not idiomatic, completely doing it wrong, place to put package doc for Golang. So that's sort of a rough tour. Any questions on that before we talk what this looks like for service catalog?
I have a question. Where is the canonical definition of the resources? Is it in the generated.proto or is it some other file? Is there just one canonical source or are there multiple that need to be kept in sync?
So there's one, and it's in types.go, and the types.generated.go, generated.pb.go, and actually the other generated compilation units like generated defaults, generated deep copy, generated conversion, basically are all driven by types.go. So there's this like ecosystem, probably terrible word to use, set of generator things that go and look at types.go and generate their different piece of it.
Are the generated things necessary, or is it sufficient to have just the non-generated stuff there and it'll, work itself out?
So that's a really good question, and I do wonder if the reason that you are asking is if the question is it necessary to start by getting these generation things in place?
Yeah, can I skip it for now and come back later, or is it a, required blah, 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 blah?
So I think that it is totally possible to live without them, with the caveat that you will immediately see the value of generating them when you have to debug a deep copy that doesn't work or a conversion that doesn't work. So by all means, I think it is totally valid to proceed without using the conversion facilities. It might be a nice microcosm of what it was like to be a Kubernetes author in the year 2014 before we generated these things, and we had the opportunity to learn to want the generators. But you will very quickly find that when you have to write this by hand, it sucks.
Well, I'm less talking about writing it by hand and more, will it compile?
Wait a minute, I think,
Not there.
Yeah, Paul, I think you may have misheard Morgan's question, unless I misheard. I thought he was asking if he just generated stuff, is that sufficient, or is there any handcrafted stuff that he needs in order to get a system up and running?
If you just generate stuff right now, if you just generate stuff, that's all you need.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I think I answered the opposite question.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. So maybe we should jump to the step to actually do the generation.
Yes, maybe so. Any more questions about this?
Yeah, I have a question. So for the generation, some of it is between the unversioned and versioned API, if I understand correctly?
Yep, that's right.
So then the first step would be to define the resources that we're defining as part of the catalog as both versioned and unversioned, and they start as the same thing, and then we quickly get the generated code for everything from that, and that would be sort of the first milestone.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So a sensible next step is, since, as Martin astutely points out, we need something to convert into and from, would be to introduce a PKG APIs v1 beta 1 or v1 alpha 1, PKG APIs service catalog v1 alpha 1 API. That will be the v1 alpha 1 version of this API group, the service catalog API group. And then get the generation in place and any other machinery necessary to add that API group into the API server. And then life is happy and good.
And are the generated files generated out of band? I guess the answer is probably yes, right? You basically point some Kubernetes repo tool at this, and it will spit out a file that we check in. So we don't necessarily have to copy all of the code generation machinery into our repo. We just kind of clone Kubernetes on the side and call the right tools.
Now, that is a good question. I don't know. I will say that we in Kubernetes have binaries that are built to do the generation, if I'm not mistaken. Jess, can you corroborate that?
Yeah, I think there are binaries that do that.
So I think probably it's probably debatable what the exact right thing is to do. We'll probably not do the exact right thing at first, but like I would totally take, if we could, just calling those binaries to generate the thing at first, like lifting the binaries from Kubernetes into this project. Don't check them in, just use them to generate stuff, and we'll figure out the right way to like vendor that stuff in. Am I answering the question that was asked this time?
Yeah, you answered my question.
Okay. Let's see. Anything else? We are kind of running out of time to talk that much further. So I wonder if it might be helpful if we can take a look at some of these real quick.
So, Paul, before we run out of time, and I'm okay with you doing this right here, but before the top of the hour, can you at some point either point to where in the make files the generation happens, or point to the EXEs that do the generation, just so Morgan has something to start pulling on a thread?
Absolutely, yeah. So I think we need an issue to track this stuff. I'll make the issue today, and I will put links in there.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so let's take a look at the generated conversion. Let's see. I'm trying to think of one that won't just like melt your face if you look at it. Okay. This looks acceptable. I think your face will still be intact. So let's take a look at this block of text here. And this is the generated conversion to convert a V1 AWS EBS volume source to an internal API AWS EBS volume source. Does anybody not know what a volume source is before we talk about this thing?
No. What is a volume source? Sorry, I have no idea what that means.
Okay, so a volume source is in the pod spec, the volumes array is a list of volume sources. So there's an API object called volume source, and volume source is a union type that can be one of, I think there were probably up to like 10, 15 different types of volumes. Yeah, 15 sounds in the neighborhood. And so those 15 different volume types are all like further qualified in their names. So AWS Elastic Block Store Volume Source is the name of the API type that models an AWS EBS volume. And this is the piece of code that converts V1 version of that thing into internal version.
Got it.
Okay. And this takes as an input, takes a V1. Oh God, what's happening? All right. I hate trackpads. Okay. All right. So this takes as an input, takes a V1 AWS Elastic Block Store volume source, takes an as an output, well, it takes as a parameter a pointer to an internal API AWS Elastic Store volume source. That thing, internal API of that thing, try saying that 3 times fast. Your tongue will be tied in a knot. I'm not liable for your dental surgery bill. And a conversion scope, which I'm going to be completely honest with everybody on this call, I don't remember what the conversion scope thing is used for. You remember that thing, Jessica? Okay. Jessica doesn't remember either. All right.
Sorry, no.
Okay. There's a Jessica race condition.
Yes, there's
an unseen Jessica, a shadow Jessica, also on this call. None of them know. The Jessica brain trust is all out of ideas. But basically, this code looks really boring, right? It takes the output volume ID, FS type, partition, read-only flag, and assigns all of those things from the input. And by the way, this returns an error, so this thing returns null. All right. And the other way around is basically like very, very similar. takes a pointer to an internal API, AWS Elastic Block Store volume source, and a output parameter of v1 AWS Elastic Block Store volume source conversion scope returns an error, does the same thing. All right, so conceptually these are pretty easy. It gets more fun when you have arrays, and that's what they look like. Let's look at defaults. Any questions on this before I move on to defaults?
Go.
All right. I believe that person that said no, since no one else said anything. So let's take a look at defaults. Let's see. AWS Elastic. Let's try for just AWS. Interesting. Interesting. Well played, API. All right. I was hoping that we could look at the same thing, same object, but I'm not finding it in my grep. So let's pick something else that's simple. Oh, there's nothing simple. Okay. Welcome to Kubernetes. So we've got this set object defaults config map that takes a v1 config map, pointer to a v1 config map. It calls set defaults config map. There's one for a list. Let's see if I can find the implementation of set defaults config map. Nope. All right, let's see. Okay, that's actually in the defaults.go. All right. I went to the wrong thing. Okay, set defaults config map. So set defaults config map says that if the data field of the config map that comes in, which none of this is material to understanding what is happening here, by the way. It's just some stuff. So this set defaults config map is where the actual defaults for this type live. And I am actually surprised in this case that there is something in defaults.go, which remember, these are boutique defaults that we can't generate. But maps are extremely uncommon in the Kubernetes API. We only use them for data in a couple places. So probably the generator doesn't care about generating defaults for maps. And that's why we have them here. But yeah, so that's the kind of chain of custody for defaults. And we're just about out of time. So any questions on this stuff before I boot you all out back to the internet that you came from? I'm hearing some precursor breathing to a question.
Yes, this is Renee Sines. I'm new to the group.
Hello, Renee. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. We are looking into adopting Kubernetes here at Walmart, and we would like to contribute to the open source effort. So we would like to crawl before we walk, before we run. So any pointers into any bugs that you guys have that we can look into and try to solve, even if it is simple, we would love to get more involved.
So I welcome you, and I especially welcome anybody willing to, and not just willing, but eager to solve Kubernetes bugs. This is probably not the most applicable forum to discuss that. I welcome you to ping me on Slack. It's pmorie, P-M-O-R-I-E, and I can point you in the right direction.
Awesome, thank you.
I'll just add though, we have a ton of issues, and a lot of them around unit tests. Unit tests are a great place to start.
Yeah, that can also work. Yeah, thank you.
All right. Anything else?
So do we have, this is jumping the gun to Thursday's meeting, I know. I want to ask now though. Do we have any plan or volunteers to get some of the code generation tools set up and or also to write some of the endpoints that we know we'll need, like get for, let's say, for brokers or something?
So the endpoint piece, we have generic REST stuff that'll do that for you. So there's a few different facets. There's the code generation. We need the generic REST stuff to come in. Morgan, I don't know if you've started looking at that at all. We need someone to introduce the V1 Alpha 1 API, versioned API for this API group, and a pinch of spice to make it nice and make sure all that stuff works together.
Yeah, I mean, I'm continuing where I was before and going forward on getting APIs populated, you know, but yeah. I don't have anything on the other side of that.
Tell you what, we can, if folks would like, there's no reason to wait until Thursday. We can have like a design or hackathon type meeting tomorrow at the usual appointed time to discuss this further. Can I gauge the level of interest in that?
So if it's same time, then sure.
Yeah, same time.
I will show up.
But you said tomorrow, Paul? Is that what you said?
Yep.
Yep. Okay, tomorrow works.
I
Okay.
could probably come for some, just may not. It might conflict with something else. But yeah, sounds cool.
Okay. You probably know a bunch of this stuff already, Jess.
It's worth it anyways, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, we'll record it for anybody that can't come. And eventually it will be uploaded to the internet, which I'm going to be trying to get caught up on today. All right. With that, I bid you all adieu, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for coming, everybody.